Hello again, and welcome back to the Animite Tales podcast. This week we're going to be doing a character workshop. We have sort of done a bit of I guess you could sort of a plan for this. We were gonna do a sort of a dice roll and see who got it. The idea is pretty much we didn't really know what topic that we wanted to tackle first. We did sort of like a sort of dice roll to see who got it first, and then afterwards we base it on that sort of order. Today's topic is a topic that I picked, and today we are going through anime villains. So a couple of rules to run down first. What defines an anime villain is pretty much has to be an actual anime and it has to be a villain. It doesn't matter if it's an antagonist or a protagonist, as long as they are an actual villainous character, it will still count. So, for instance, characters that are more specific to the actual main story, if they are still evil, they'll still count. But also, yes, this is Character Workshop, so we're going to be using the Animite Tales tabletop RPG system to try and figure out how roughly we would make these builds. So, without any further ado, I guess we'll get right into the topic. Kane, you are the first one, so you'll be doing yours first.
Apparently so. Presentation time, eh? Alright, well, the character that I'm making today is Xenon from Black Clover. I guess the possible spoilers ahead.
Yes. Possible spoilers ahead for Black Clover, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Tanya Saga of Evil.
Yeah, pretty much. So I guess I'll get into well. Xenon is basically one of the three Dark Triad members in the show. Obviously in Black Clover, it's a magic-based system, but everyone kind of has specific magics they're born with. So in that sense, it was pretty easy to sort of sort out his abilities, because essentially, thanks to the way he's built, he's basically an anomaly in our system. Because the man was born with bone magic at first, so he could generate and manipulate, I guess, bones out of his body. And then later on, without going into too much detail, he ends up making a contract with the devil that allows him to gain spatial magic. So with this, the bone magic was actually, I say hardest quotation marks, because we don't have a specific bone power, so it was basically just biology manipulation. But ending up taking biokinesis, but you don't really use biokinesis for like half its stuff. You basically just use it to grant range to your bone generation.
So you used it so the character sort of has the ability to generate their own bones and sort of like grow them out of their body. And you use the ability of bone manipulation, but you base the range of it on biological kinesis that allows you to have a range based on something. So that's how you sort of got the ability to make like the giant sort of bone tendrils and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I only took one ability from that power, which was Ailment Calamity, which is basically the ability to make ailments worse. Now, he doesn't really have an ability like that, but I more built it into one of his techniques. So I'll explain why I picked that one later. And then the other one, the hardest choice, really. I didn't know how I was going to get spatial, so I took spatial, which allowed me. Well, I had to take actually quite a few abilities for that one. So obviously you start off with Pocket Dimension, which he doesn't have a Pocket Dimension at all. I don't think really anyone in Black Clover has a Pocket Dimension. Oh no, there is one. There is one character who does. But that's a completely different matter. But the ones that did matter was link space, which is essentially being able to link up two portals and travel through them. Spatial trap, which essentially allows you to essentially use space to, well, put someone in a trap that stops them from being able to move. And spatial constructs, which is essentially the ability to solidify space and create sort of solid ounces of space. Which again, all sort of most of that is pretty much needed for one singular ability, which is I guess I'll go into the SPMAs considering. Actually, I guess I don't know. I'll start with one of the items he has first. Pretty much the only item he has, which is important for pretty much everyone in Black Clover, which is the grimoire he has. Now, that is just essentially a legendary blood transfused item in this case. But essentially, the way it works is thanks to the fact it's blood transfused, he can have it he can manipulate it so he can sort of have it float sort of relatively close to him. He can store a single SPMA ability he doesn't have to roll for, but arguably the sort of main ability about it in this instance is he can write down SPMAs in it and use them at any point as long as the grimoire is on him and he can open it up to that specific page. That is important later because it will go back to two of the abilities that he has. Now, the first two abilities he has are basically, I'll put it simply, they're just like filler abilities. Because the first one is called Demon Sword, which essentially he just makes a sword out of bones, which just in this instance I've just made it so it allows the sword to do passively like half of his damage dice, which in this instance is 10 points of damage.
Okay, that's pretty good.
The next one is just called Bone Fang, which is 2 times damaging attack. However, essentially the way I've done it is to lower the requirement, I basically had it that normally a biokinesis you can basically make undodgeable attacks. But I've made this so you have to specifically use your bone manipulation and launch it at the opponent, meaning that it has to be through your bone manipulation and obviously is dodgeable, destroyable, etc. There are multiple ways. You can't just auto hit with it basically. Unless you do it through other means. So through doing that, I managed to make that a bit better. But then we actually come to one of his spells, one of his few named spells that he actually has, called Eternal Fangs, which essentially I mix Bone Fangs with, and Ailment Calamity. Now, the reason I did this is when he uses this ability, most people that are hit by it are shown, brutally injured by it. So I thought the best way to sort of depict that with this ability is essentially the way Ailment Calamity works is when you can either give someone a new ailment or you can increase how bad a ailment they have currently is. Depending on how your roll is, depends on how much you can give them a new one or affect the previous one. A plus 20 being the highest way you can affect it.
So say, for instance, if you were attacking someone with this, it would potentially automatically cause an injury, and then if you hit them again and they fail another con roll, it would automatically either give them an additional one or actually make the previous one they had worse.
Yes.
So
Now, the thing about this is I made this at its base ability. However, the Eternal Fangs is a 20 plus, which means whenever this is activated and it hits someone, it is automatically at its best possibility when it comes to ailment calamity.
okay.
So basically, you are always guaranteed to get the best variant of ailment calamity when this ability is activated.
Wow.
So it's a 2 times damaging attack. So instead of 2d10s, you do 4d10s, and you basically are guaranteed to cause an immediate ailment.
Jeez.
Yeah. If you give me a second, I will look at the specifics of that because I just want to remember how many should have had this bit more prepared. Just want to check how many that actually is.
Whilst you're doing that, have you got any questions so far, Sam?
Not really. I'm afraid I don't actually know the character, so I don't actually know if this is how it's meant to be. But it sounds like a cool character. Sounds nifty.
The main concept of the character, as Kane already said, is just pretty much that they're a powerful mage that has bone magic and space magic.
No, I get that. I just mean like I've never actually seen them. I've not seen them. Only from what he said, it sounds like it's correct.
I will say one thing about this is that, like, when you first see him fight, he looks metal as hell. And the fact that you've come up with an ability where every time he pierces someone, the injuries are actually always worse than they originally seem. So it is like that really sort of like over the top, really metal as hell. Like, oh, it's just a stab. Well, the stab is actually like it's immediately making itself worse as it, gets into your skin.
So a 20 or above allows it to either 3 ailments / injuries increase to the next stage of severity, or 1 ailment / injury to 3 stages above its original severity.
So in other words, if you fail to get one above, so say for instance, okay, I got a 20. You now need to get a 15. You failed to get a 15. It's the equivalent of if you basically got a 4 or a 5.
Yeah.
That's bad.
See, you can very much hit someone twice with this attack, and the fight will be over just based on injuries alone.
Yes, yeah.
The next ability was just a core improvement to increase the spatial manipulation range, which comes important for my last ability of this character, or I guess the master ability that they have, but I will get to that. The only thing I guess I will say from this point is this character is meant to be a devil host, so his whole thing is he's meant to get his spatial magic from a devil. Now, to be honest, doing the actual devil thing is extremely annoying. There are ways that it could be done. But in this instance, the way I've just done it for kind of my own convenience, you could go more in depth with this aspect if you want, but I just wanted to make most of the abilities. I made it so the character's starting... I've forgotten what it's called. But essentially, this character's starting thing is gift, where essentially one of his powers was sort of granted to him.
Power discovery. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. I think there might be one other that might work as well, but I chose this one as essentially he formed a contract with a being to gain this power from them.
Fair enough.
But again, if you really want to go into more depth and detail, you could do that. And there is also one other thing that comes up later, but I think I'll describe that at the end of this. But yeah, the other really boring things is just SPMA, and the other thing that essentially allows you to increase your SPMA modifier. Really basic, kind of just simple, but necessary for the character considering their main ability is their magic.
Oh, so skill harmony and
skill harmony, yeah.
Yeah.
The next ability is bone armor, which I essentially just did bone fangs and bone manipulation as an advanced technique and combine them together, but made the specific rule that the bones generated essentially have to cover you, and they cannot be used for any other purpose, otherwise the bone armor is immediately undone. But doing that basically means you have the equivalent of about a 40 resistant sort of physical armor, essentially, that covers you. And because you can heal yourself with bone manipulation, you can heal your armor for the equivalent of like 2d10s worth with this character. So in that instance, you have a self-repairable armor that you can fix. And you could arguably make it tougher under other circumstances. The next ability, again, kind of a filler one for another technique, is Spatial Slash, which is just a 1.5, increase to spatial attacks. Again, boring, but filler for a technique we'll get after this next one, which is this character's sort of main ability, I would argue, which I have shortened to Spatial Domination. I said this technique requires quantum manipulation, so one of, I believe, the evolution of spatial manipulation, which allows you to increase and decrease the size of things, which is the ability we'll be using in this scenario for a very specific reason. And it also allows you to access, I believe, what other people's pocket dimensions. Quantum space. But that ability is not so important for this. But this is also where the spatial trap and spatial distortion constructs come in. So with a 20 plus, the user essentially takes control of a space within their manipulation range. It can be how far they want it to be within that range. Essentially, they then would create a cube of space using their spatial constructs. Within that space, or I should say any targets within that space, the user can essentially put into a spatial trap immediately, which is just a very basic ability. But anyone with essentially emission ranged abilities, or anything similar to that, will have their range divided by 10 immediately. So if you have 100 range, your range now becomes, or 100 meters worth of range, your ability now becomes 10 meters. Also, any attacks that you do with any of those abilities are immediately, you have to take 20 off of every attack. Which means if your attack cannot surpass 20 points of damage, you are unable to even get it to appear, as it is simply too weak to exist in that space. Now, there are technical ways you could bypass this, but you essentially have to use very close manipulative ranged abilities for that. So essentially within this space, you have complete control over the entire battlefield. How the only issue is the barriers can be destroyed, or the constructs can be destroyed. If that is the case, then the ability kind of just ends because that space isn't there anymore.
So pretty much, like the entire thing, you create this massive construct which equal to your range or something.
Yes, which with your manipulation range specifically, which in this character's case is up to 60 meters.
Yeah,
so
that's actually insanely powerful. That's really cool because I mean that pretty much guarantees that like anyone who's inside it basically is now going to struggle to move, if not actually is going to find it almost impossible to move because they need to beat your roll that you did create it. Their ranged abilities are a tenth of what they are, and then it then takes away 20 points of the damage from whatever attack they have. So in other words, anything weaker than 21 is nullified.
Pretty much, yeah.
That is okay. That is so overpowered, but that is so cool.
I mean, also thanks to that, technically any of your spatial attacks can come from any direction within that area.
Okay.
And theoretically, there's more use of it. You could just do AoE spatial attacks that no one would be able to avoid thanks to the confined space they're in. Because unless they can leave the barrier. The only weakness as well of the barrier is it does not stop teleportation-based abilities.
Okay.
So if you have the ability to leave the barrier, then without physical movement, so like intangibility or like I just said, teleportation, you still will be able to leave the barrier. The other way to combat it is either one, if you can overpower the user's sort of role they used for it, or if you have your own sort of spatial ability in which you can sort of create your own space within inside the dominated zone. So there are ways to combat this ability, but it's still not an easy one to get past with most powers. The last ability, that is one of the ones in the Grimoire, is a word I'm going to need help if I can send, because I don't even know where to begin with that one.
Dunslave.
Dunslave. Well, the sword of Dunslave, I guess that's how we'll pronounce it, is one of the spells within the Grimoire I made, which is another advanced technique that requires the Demon Sword, Pocket Dimension, and the Spatial / Pure Technique that I made. Thanks to how I've built this is a 25, but the user, thanks to the Grimoire, is able to automatically conjure up this weapon because of the once per thing they can use any of their SPMAs within the Grimoire.
Okay.
But essentially, they make a sword and they coat it in spatial energy, or a spatial distortion. Anything they slash with this, the specific part that is hit with this sword, the enemy, if it's a person or I guess I should say a living thing, has to roll a con roll to, con roll one requirement less than what the sword was made. So in this case, they would need to roll a 20 on con.
Minimum.
If they fail, that a part of them that was hit is essentially erased. Yeah.
Jeez.
So, say if you stab someone through the chest and you just so happen to hit their heart, that part of their heart will just be gone. It's not destroyed, it just is not there. Or say if you cut someone's shoulder, you have just completely erased the joints that were connecting the shoulder and the point of the arm.
So it pretty much guarantees that even if someone is to have the ability to sort of like put you back together or something like that, it's actually impossible for you to be able to easily be healed. Someone would actually have to have incredible advanced regeneration.
You'd have to recreate from new, essentially.
But also, even if it is against someone with regenerative powers, you're also practically stating that every time I hit you, automatically you're taking an injury if you don't succeed this roll. And if you don't succeed this roll, it's guaranteed at least some chunk of you is coming off, and it's not flying away, it's just gone.
Yeah. And if you are brilliantly able to beat that roll, you then take the damage of the weapon and the spatial combined. So you are not safe even if you finish the roll. So, which I believe would be, I think, 2d10s plus 10 plus 2d8s plus, what's half of 16? 8?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd be taking that if you succeed, which, yes, is better than a possible immediate death.
But you still take that damage regardless, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the next ability, which specifically requires the sword, is called Spatial Rupture. this ability allows you to add the erasure ability to a spatial projectile launched from the sword.
Okay.
Now, I remind you, spatial projectiles, if you have enough size, can cover an entire human body.
Oh.
Yes. Which means, if they fail a under 20 roll on, they don't exist anymore.
Gone. Oh god, okay.
Yes. And my character can do it up to 80 meters, which means he can just erase an entire area from existence. Now, lucky for you lot, it's only a new skill.
So once a day.
So once a day, he can just basically insta-kill a mass ton of people.
Good lord.
Yes. That is the final ability that I place on the Grimoire, and his final SPMA.
Okay.
Joe, don't make this a character, please.
Sorry, I was too busy taking notes on this character. What did you say, Sam? That's Xenon. That I have to be honest. I was going to go through the questions, but we're actually running quite thin on time now. I quite like it. What do you think, Sam?
Seems. I'm not sure if it would actually be able to be used, considering some of the abilities are almost instant kills or knockouts.
Yeah, I mean, like his three offensive abilities are basically I win the fight.
Yeah, I mean,
even if they're not.
This seems more like old school D&D than modern D&D, where it's you just die. Like, you feel the conro. Well, you dead, and you can't. Oh, and you're disappeared. Can't be revived. Yep, you're dead. Character sheet burned.
Yeah. To be fair, you only got pierced by these 4d10s. Oh, that's pretty bad, but that's far from the worst. Also, you have 3 ailments, and they all go to your lungs. Oh.
Yeah. And your heart is gone, and so is your shoulder blade, and your head. And now the entire area you're on is also not gone.
And here's the best part. If you combine that with spatial domination, you can put someone in a spatial trap, walk up to them with the sword, stab them in the heart, and you've won the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think the craziest part to me was that I was saying this to you is like almost every power is completely scundered by this ability. The only power that I could argue that would actually be absolutely fun in the terms of the range thing is if you were to fight someone with like incredibly high buffs on chemistry manipulation with what is it called, atmospheric manipulation, where they get 10 times their range. So all you would have done is just sort of like put their range back to the way that it was before they got their level 10, and then it's just like, all right, let's go, and that's just literally it. And I think the minus 20 thing is actually quite impressive, but the scariest part is that that's actually the way that the ability is built as well.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get an additional ability point from that, so it's not even all that much more costly. In fact, it doesn't cost anything additionally, because the power states that if you shrink things, they lose a certain amount of damage, and if you increase the size of things, it actually means that they gain a certain amount of additional damage based on how many more times that they've been increased. So the fact that you can just go, yeah, your range is now 10th, and also your damage is now 20, n minus 20. It's just insane.
Yeah, also with the sword, that's based on the concept that you do it without rolling. If you roll for the sword, there is a potential that the requirement they need to meet is even higher.
Yes, yeah. Right. I think it's pretty good enactment of the character to the abilities. I think it's as close as you're going to get. But I think it's also about time that we go over to Sam. Sam, okay. What have you got for us?
Well, I have got Mary Sue, second lieutenant of the Unified States Army in the anime Saga of Tanya the Evil, and I'm afraid, regrettably, I've not done all the SPMAs or trades because I was uncertain how far we actually had to get into the meat and bones of it.
That's absolutely fine. Run us through it.
But if you want, very basically, she would have at least level 10 SPMA, because there is one SPMA I do know she would have.
Okay.
Which would be the level 10. And a level 10 apostle trade of God / being X, depending on who you ask.
Okay.
Okay, well, she'd obviously be Power Catalyst, level 20. all buffs,
Okay.
with Animite potential.
Oh wow. Okay.
And pretty much all the things I'm talking about now are just items she would have that would give her these powers. The first one is, of course, the computational orb, which I should actually say what I should say. I just realized Kane mentioned the magic system of his system, so I should mention mine.
Yeah.
In Saga 10 Evil, they do have magic, and it's based on these items called computational orbs, which they can insert their mana into, which allow them to rewrite the world slightly, depending on how much mana they put in, and kind of the will of the user. So they can do like explosives and see further and fly, things like that. And there's also yeah. And is there anything else I need to say, Kane, considering you've actually seen the anime now?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, she has the Unified States version of the computational orb, which I think would have level 10 emotional empowerment
Okay.
with the abilities emotional armor, mindless state, outrage, and explosive emotion.
Ooh.
Because in the anime, it is shown that she essentially has the power of rage, like righteous rage, but only whenever she sees her enemy, the main character, Tanya, where she essentially becomes overpowered. The other ability the computational orb would have telekinesis, but it would have the same unique attribute as Matthew, wherein it is the range is disappeared entirely and it's only based on the body.
Okay, so like basically tactile based telekinesis.
Yeah. And it would have force field generation, tactile telekinesis, and telekinetic skin.
Okay.
Because using the computational orb, it allows them to have rewrite reality so they are stronger. It allows them to make force fields so when people shoot at them, the bullets essentially bullets explosive do no damage.
Yeah, okay.
They'd also have the flying gear, which is a full kind of outfit setup. And I can't remember, is it a broomstick or is it like boots for Mary Sue? It's boots,
It does change, but I believe her main to get up is like the boots sort of, or like the ski boots sort of thing.
Yes, it's the ski boots.
Yeah.
Which is level 10 flight, which would have greater heights, fly away, the flight altitude buff ×2, ultrasonic flight, and meteoric flight.
Okay.
Because they can fly high and they can fly fast and they can hit you really hard. Yeah. The next item is the rifle, which in the light novel they explain rifles as being the scepter to the computational orb's kind of orb necklace power. It's like the scepter and orb. The rifle would have level 10 projectile enhancement, homing bullets, fire enhancement, and ultimate projectile. The rest would be buffs. And also level 10 combustion manipulation, because they can empower their shots to explode.
Oh, sweet.
And I think it would have incendiary bombs, bomb control, stacker bombs, and nuclear option. Because they have blown up whole cities in the past. And considering who Mary Sue is, I'm sure she could blow up more than just a city.
Valid.
And the last item, which I couldn't decide, should I just make this to the computational orb itself or to this item, but I decided to put it to this item, is the Cross of God, brackets being X, which is level 10 Luck Child, with the level 10 being absolute luck, but can only be used by a person with an apostle of level 10.
Okay, fair enough.
Which, yeah, because she is a devout believer, and it is a holy artifact, much like Tanya's, but it has the opposite effect. where it forces upon you to have a level 10 apostle. Okay, it brainwashes you slightly into believing.
Fair enough.
And I think really the only SPMA that I know for certain would be, it'd probably be a level 10 transformational one, which would allow you to use all these items at once.
So, how would that work?
I'd probably move the Animite potential and lower a few buffs from the power catalyst, but it will allow you to use all the items at once rather than having to try and do them one at a time.
To be fair, I guess you could always have it that it's kind of like a. It would have to probably more than likely be a strenuous form.
That's what I'm interested in, just forming.
Actually, then again,
is there anything I'm missing, Kane, that you can think of that's wrong with this character?
I don't think so. The only thing I will say is that, I mean, you might have covered this, and I could be mistaken, but in the anime with her like gun, she does have that like weird, like super laser beam attack she likes to spam.
That's what I was thinking how to do that. I was debating between either projectile enhancement and energy manipulation.
Yeah, because you could have done energy manipulation. I think projectile enhancement is the better choice, especially with combustion.
Especially because
I went with with the idea that the combustion manipulation was the kind of energy beam thing.
Well,
that kind of gave off the effect.
Here's the problem with that, because the energy beam thing, that would be more like explosion emission, because you can actually make beams of explosive power. But how you described it is because it has nuclear option, it's more like it enhances the bullet. Whatever the bullet then next hits, it explodes.
Yeah. Maybe I'd have to do both of those then. I would have to have both combustion manipulation ones for it.
To be fair, I actually have to agree with Kane with the concept of. I think it would probably be an additional energy blast one, probably with potentially even radiant mode, where like it does double damage for a short.
There's no reason why you couldn't put it into the weapon with the other two, and it would still work fine.
Yeah.
So I would just say it'd be energy beam emission with radiant mode, because it wouldn't be energy manipulation, and then it would just be all buffs.
And then like for a short period of time, you can activate the radiant mode, and the shots would be pure double damage.
Yeah, because it's shown to have not only ridiculous range but just overwhelming firepower.
That's why I went with level 20 catalyst and level 10 rage mode. Because whenever she does that, it is when she's enraged. And as Joe has told me many times, if you use a stockpile powers can be used to like buff up other powers.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why.
It is also stated that she does gain when she sees her arch enemy. She does go into a rage mode that basically increases her magical power and her mana regeneration.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think
and
I have
also
an idea as to how you could work the multiple power stone usage thing, because I think that was my only sort of note really, is that the problem being that you have this one computational orb that has about 3 powers, and then you have the separate boots thing, and Catalyst can only activate one thing at a time. But the fact that you had an idea for an SPMA that sort of covered a few of those, you could potentially have it that it's actually a new skill, and it has a range, like a diameter or radius within a certain radius of you. Now, you could say it's tactile, like all of the range has gone to tactiles, like any items and objects that you're currently holding or currently wearing, you activate all of them at the same time, as if you are one big combined power stone. So you get all of the different abilities and power stones from all of the power stone objects, you can activate them all, blah, blah, blah. And then you have that as like a master skill, and having it that like the downside is like, oh, it's all tactile, because then you can only use your items that you're currently wearing. But then also the upside is, if it's 10 plus and you get the special ability, you can make that a bonus action where you never have to worry about rolling it, and you can just continuously be active in the background, and you can use any and every power that is currently attached to you. So therefore, the only time that you ever lose them is if the items get destroyed or removed from you, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That is how it works as well. Or maybe you might be able to do it so like if the computational orb gets destroyed, then none of the other items work.
You could
Because that is how it works kind of in the anime.
Hmm.
And that is how it works, is that the computational orb essentially is the
Yeah, it's how they use their magic essentially. So if they don't have that, it doesn't really work.
No. So if it gets destroyed, like the flight gear, the rifles, pretty much everything just fails.
So that I guess that could be sort of like a unique attribute on the item, or even a unique attribute on the user, because you could potentially. No, wait, I've got it. You could potentially have a unique attribute if you wanted, but I was actually going to say, what if you actually had that the power of discovery is via conduit, and the computational orb is the conduit, and therefore it's just that at a certain point the user never really gets over the fact that they need the computational orb, otherwise they either can't use their powers or they begin to have disadvantage when trying to use any of the other stuff without the computational orb. I mean, either way, I like the build. I actually think that it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think it's a good representation as well.
There you go, Sam.
Yeah,
high praise.
Yeah, I did look her up things that happen in like the light novel, and apparently she cannot be hit by bullets at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking into that while you were describing her abilities. Apparently, bullets will dodge her, and fire cannot reach her. So
that is so cool.
Yeah.
That's why I said the luck child thing.
Yeah.
But apparently, the only person that can do it is Tanya, because she also has a holy relic, which grants her the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So let's move on. Last one is my one, Mahito from Jujutsu Kaisen. Mahito is what's known as a cursed spirit, basically the manifestation of malice, evil, curses, all combined into creating a sentient form. Mahito is supposed to be the cursed spirit of the malice of humanity. His ability is known as idle transfiguration. Upon tactile contact with an individual, he can change the transfiguration of the soul, bending it and manipulating it however he wishes. It can then also alter a person's physiological form, and thus forth potentially killing them. The next thing that you should sort of know about this guy is because he's a curse, he can't actually be seen by normal people. Only sorcerers can actually see him. And the other thing is because that he's entirely made out of cursed energy, he actually can heal himself very quickly, very rapidly, even if he's taking serious damage, like blowing off half of his body. In the actual show, so far, we've gone up to season 1, but a couple of the things I'm going to talk about is a couple of things that may very well happen in season 2. However, most of the stuff I am going to be talking about is from season 1, so potential spoilers ahead. Anyway, so how I built this guy was I made yet again another anomaly. I gave him a couple of different abilities, the first one being the two powers that I gave him was telepathy and biology manipulation. The reason for telepathy and not anything else is because there are a couple of abilities that he gets that are sort of relatively telepathic. For instance, being able to create illusions or special barriers and stuff like that. So if I just get up the thing that I've got here. So the first thing that I did is I gave him telepathy with memory manipulation, which will become important soon enough. Second factor is that he did have a couple of buffs, because a couple of abilities didn't really make sense. But the main factor of his abilities are Mental Link, which is the level 3, Psychic Attack, which allows him to deal psychic damage, Program Directive, which allows him to put one specific direct sort of direction into a person's head, and they must follow it. Illusion Creation, which again creates illusions, and Brainwashing, which allows them to, well, brainwash people. Biokinesis under Biomanipulation, however, he will never really use the range for this, mostly due to his unique attribute, because his power discovery is unique attribute. The function of the ability is, even if he gains range with his powers, he will never be able to use his range for any of his special abilities, unless if it's on himself or when he's actually affecting other people. In other words, he can gain range, but not automatically. He actually has to touch other individuals and manipulate them, and there he can stretch them and alter them in shapes and sizes up to his personal range, which would have been his range with biokinesis. Because of this downside, because he has to physically contact people, all biological manipulation perks from then on have one increment less. So they're actually a little easier for him to perform. The perks that I gave him were actually every single perk, from bone manipulation, bio boost, biomass devastation, ailment calamity, advanced regeneration, organ creator, and hand on heart. The reason for all of these are based on his SPMAs. The first SPMA I gave him was called Cursed Energy. It's pretty much he requires both his psychic attack and biomass devastation. He activates this ability, and upon hitting an individual, he will deal both a biological attack, which cannot be resisted, and a psychic damage attack. This means that he will deal 1d8 plus a d12. Well, technically 2d6s. Either way, this means that he does anywhere between a minimum of 2 or 3 damage, all the way up to a maximum of 20 damage. This can also be used for injuries as well as ailments. His next ability is called Cursed Presence. Pretty much, he just uses... It's a new skill. He uses illusion creation. He can only use this once per short rest, but he creates this illusion on himself. And it's actually got a very low roll requirement, despite actually having what seems to be a very overpowered ability. So the ability pretty much states is the user creates themselves to be as if they are invisible to the naked eye. People with perception alone cannot see the user. However, they must instead roll willpower. Certain people may very well be able to roll purely perception. However, they must get 25 or above. If they do so, they will be able to see the user with this ability. However, the downsides are anyone who uses any kind of ability that would allow them to sense the presence of the user through aura, life detection, any special psychic ability, sensory-based powers that actually allow them to see or smell or sense the supernatural, they will be able to see this individual automatically. They don't even need to have a roll. They just have to do whatever it is that they may need to activate the ability, and that's it. So that's sort of the main downside, is anyone who actually does have a psychic-like ability will be able to passively perceive them, which is kind of the whole point, because in the show, people can perceive him regardless, unless they are without cursed energy. In that case, they won't be able to see him. Anyway, after that, I gave him a mental link increase so that he could then have up to 6 people that he could mental link together. Mental link pretty much allows you to be able to connect yourself to another person through telepathy, but because that I've shortened his range of his telepathy to tactile contact, he also then has the additional buff of things. When he uses mental link, he can pretty much link to someone as long as he is within physical contact with them. This allows him to understand people's emotions and even potentially read their minds. But the only real reason for this is because Mahito actually doesn't have the ability to read minds, but when he is in contact with someone, he can read their soul. Which actually helps him later on. The next ability I gave him SPMA and Skill Harmony to be able to give him an additional boost to his own abilities. On top of that, we've also got self-transfiguration. This allows him to literally manipulate his own body. I've paired it with illusion creation, bone manipulation, advanced regeneration, psychic attack, and organ creation. This is because that despite and no matter what kind of injury it looks like on his somewhat humanoid form, he can regenerate and rejuvenate himself almost perfectly. This pretty much allows him to also shapeshift in a way. And I don't know if you guys can see, but the second picture that I've sort of got here, you might be able to see that he's turned his arm into like 3 large sort of like giant chains sort of things.
Yeah.
So he has the ability to do this through the means of being able to turn his body into certain different parts by being able to transfigure his own soul without any cause or harm to himself. Because of this, I've basically had it that he can not only do this, but also he'll be able to manipulate himself into having, like, using his bone manipulation to create bone-like weapons that'll be, like, razor sharp, and so on and so forth. I've also done it so that when he uses this can actually also be used in the set of regeneration. So, if he, say, for instance, gets his arm perfectly mangled, and the opponent is sort of like, okay, now he's got, one less arm, one less leg, whatever, to worry about, the user can roll this, instantaneously regenerate it, and even turn it into something that they actually preferably need, but also having the ability to return it back into whatever they need as well. This is actually one of the scariest things about him, is because that he continuously can change his shape and form at will, which allows him to have a multitude of different ways in which that he can fight. He's also got an ability called Soul Multiplicity. Pretty much the entire ability is that he needs to get a hold of someone who he can manipulate through the means of biokinesis. He'll then add a Prime Directive and use Psychic Attack and Mental Link on them. The way that this ability works is anyone within the user's range can be added to the user's Mental Link. All of those who are added must roll against Prime Directive. If they fail, the user manipulates all of the targets, dealing physical and psychic damage per creature manipulated in this way. This basically means if the user is able to get his hands on two individuals, say for instance they sort of sneak up behind someone, two guards, grab both guards by the back of their necks, and then use this ability. If they both fail against Prime Directive, he could then use both of these persons' bodies to basically make giant fists shoot out of their bodies and punch other people within a certain maximum range of I think it's 10 meters, I want to say. Yeah, he has a biokinesis range of 10 meters. So you can basically touch two guards. The guards then just have like their entire body sort of like shape-shifted so that then giant human fists come out and punch people. And because of this, the damage that is dealt to whoever gets hit by those attacks will take psychic and physical damage based on the user's powers. Again, this is not a massive amount, but it is something that happens to them. However, if the user is able to use multiple at the same time, they could potentially multiply this damage in an increased environment. However, the only problem is that they can't really hold any more than one or two people in their hands, because, they're people. It's not exactly very easy to hold multiple people in a single palm of their hand. And if they only have one hand, or two hands, then they can only use it on people so much. But anyway, the last ability, and this is the final ability of all of these, is Idle Transfiguration. Now, I had to make this a master skill because it is, without a doubt, the most overpowered broken ability, but it's also very much important and necessary. So the ability is called Idle Transfiguration. It uses Brainwashing, Prime Directive, and Self-Transfiguration. The ability itself states that upon tactile contact, the user attempts to brainwash a target. If successful, the target will willingly allow the user to manipulate their entire body. Upon success, the user can choose what and how much the user wishes to manipulate, as well as enforce a Prime Directive every time they manipulate the target. Those affected by this ability are called transfigured humans, which cannot contest against being manipulated or being altered biologically or mentally. So they can't contest those roles ever again unless if someone can break them out of it. Now here's the scary thing. In the actual show, he transfigures a bunch of different humans into small, tiny little crushed up idols. And he can later on pull them out of his pocket or out of his mouth at one point, which is really gross, but he does. And he can then resize them into shapes of like monsters that he wants to then fight for him. As he does that, he tells them what to do. In other words, giving them a Prime Directive by saying, now go off and kill them. Throws them out, and then basically like Pokemon, they suddenly start coming out of like these almost ball-like shapes to suddenly attack whoever. The reason this is so scary is because that if this person can land this attack and do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that the character is dead, but it might as well do. The only last ability to sort of really be sort of important about this is I did go one further. I made an overdrive, and if you see the GIF that I've put You'll sort of know where I'm going with this. So the abilities that I've created is I've created a bundle of weaknesses such as it's tactile contact. The user has to touch their targets with their hands. The final ability is known as domain expansion. The ability is actually known as the personal personification of absolute perfection. I think I might be wrong about that. But the ability is pretty much the user creates a barrier. Inside of the barrier, anyone who's inside of it basically classes as being inside of the palm of the user's hand. This means that the user does not need to have physical tactile contact on anyone who's inside. The outside of the barrier, people basically need to be able to deal around about, I want to say around about 16 points of damage to be able to break the barrier, which isn't all that bad, but why would you want to get in to a place like that when the user has the ability to manipulate the souls of anyone who is inside? With only a single roll, they could transmute multiple humans. And that's pretty much my build. Anything to say, Sam or Kane? I know you guys have just muted, so...
No, it's all good. No, I think I think you built him pretty accurate to the way he's depicted. I know there is technically another ability you could have made, but that would go into spoilers, and I don't know if you'd have enough slots for that. So
I had very little slots, and I wanted to make sure that I got all the ones that were shown in the show, or at least most of them. Soul Multiplicity is one that is shown later on, but I wanted to sort of show that one off as well.
It's not a show I've seen again, so I can only attest to what I've seen in the 3 pictures. But it seems like, from what you described, it seems like it works.
I'd say the most ingenious part about this build is the fact that the original ability basically allows the user to touch upon someone's soul, shapeshift them, and basically almost pretty much instantly either kill them or instantly ruin a person. The user can use it positively as well by giving them additional bonuses or even allowing them to, like, say for instance there's one person who doesn't know how to use their abilities, but it is confirmed that they have the power to use curse techniques. And he just goes, oh, I'm going to use my ability to help you understand and realize how to use it. So he basically awakens him. There's also later on a character that he uses that ability on. A person actually, he has like a missing arm and a missing leg, and he's also paralyzed. And he just touches them and transfigures their soul, so that then their body is actually perfectly healthy. And so he can use it for good, but to be fair, he does kill that dude not too long after he does that. But the whole point is that it is a transfigurative ability. Now, most of the time, most people will have to roll con or willpower against people like this, but again, if they use their transfiguration ability on someone, they could transfigure a person, say for instance, give them something good, give them something bad, and brainwash them. But they could brainwash them to a certain extent of just saying, you will do only as I say if I ever need to say it. And then once that's done, they could leave the person alone, come back and, do whatever they need. Now, the other upside and downside to this is brainwashing is actually possible to break out of. And again, if they only transmute you ever so slightly to a small inconvenience, or even actually to give you something like a buff or a bonus, then you could potentially have it that if someone can do enough damage to you, you then get to roll to see if you can break out of the brainwashing. However, if they say, for instance, turn you into some kind of like small little creature that they then hide in their pocket, and they say, oh yeah, you can't physically move because I paralyzed you. I've turned you into basically a small living statue, and then I just put you away in my pocket. They could do that to a load of humans and then just keep them around and then use the stockpile of humans. And again, depending on the situation, it might be too late for you. You might not be able to even be turned back into something normal. If you have a certain ability or power, yeah, sure. But even healing factor, you wouldn't be able to heal from it because it manipulates your belief as to what your actual body is supposed to be. So technically,
Do you know what I love
no, go on.
about you two? You decided to go for like the most broken, instantly dead, like instant kill characters. Like I at least went that. Oh, I have to at least hit you and you die. You went for I'm going to destroy your soul from the inside out. I'm going to make sure that you can't be revived and you never will.
I mean, I think it was something like I recently discovered as like the most dangerous thing is the idle transfiguration. Other than that, the most amount of damage he can do is. I mean, to be fair, actually, if he transmutes up to 6 humans at a time and he puts them all in his hands, and he uses soul multiplicity, he can actually do. I think it's like 6 times his own damage. So I think it is like he can do 120 maximum, or around about. What is it? 3 times. 3 times 6, so 16. No, 18 points of damage. So you could potentially do 18 points of damage. Is it? No. No, that's not it, is it? Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is 18 points of damage. Yeah, so he can do a minimum of 18 and a maximum of 120 if he uses that. But again, he has to stockpile all the humans, which means, again, rolling it separately. But yeah, no, I see what you mean, that like my ability is literally one touch
I mean,
dead.
Sam, you've gone for like the most conventional sort of really powerful character.
Yes.
Like lots of powers, but like really good abilities. And then we've kind of gone for just bullshit.
Yeah, I'm going to ruin your day.
I think the funny thing is that none of us went for like a somewhat sort of modest villain that has one ability and is really good with them. It's like even the least amount of abilities I have, it's multiple sets of factors and abilities that all work and combine. Even Kane, you could argue, is like, oh yeah, it's just 2 powers, but it's still multiple factors and abilities that are also intertwined so perfectly. And again, Sam, yours being the power that has the capability of using so many other abilities and equipment. I think it was actually quite interesting. I didn't think that I'd see a catalyst make it in here, which is weird considering catalysts are the bridge to broken, basically. Yeah. What did we learn?
I actually just realized we should learn. We realized one thing. One of the questions would be, who do you think would win in a fight?
Oh, using the system and the way that we built them.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to say Kane's character, because it doesn't matter if my guy can't touch either of you guys. It's done. Like it's over. If he touches you, yeah, you're both gone. But
if I mean, it's that we both have insta-win conditions because if he uses spatial domination, he's basically just won the fight.
Yep.
So,
is it weird that I also think it might actually be Mary Sue, mostly because of the range?
yeah, they do have a good chance of Mary Sue to actually just because also the thing is your character traditionally deals far more damage than either of our characters.
Oh yeah.
Like to a very ridiculous degree.
And a large area.
Yeah.
I think, in all honesty, if they were starting around about, let's say, for instance, 10 meters away from each other, in like on the ground and everything, it's like, okay, begin. I think there is a good chance of Xenon winning because that he can just roll to activate his spatial thing reactively, and if he does that, it's just game over for everyone else. But at the same time,
I mean, the thing is, though, it could do the instantly you failed luck because of absolute luck.
Yeah.
So natural one.
Well, if you're making it an apostle ability and also an apostle item, you'd still actually have to roll and beat the opponent's roll at that point. Because you actually have to have it. You have to have it on actively. Because it's not. Luck manipulation isn't on passively all the time, unless if you are the luck child.
Even if you do the special ability we talked about, where it's like connecting to all,
you'd have to have it that your roll outpaced someone else's roll, unless of course if you got the higher roll in the initiative, activated your ability as your bonus action at the beginning of your roll, then yeah. But at that point, then it's the question of okay, well if whoever
this
would
fight
win,
is basically who goes first.
Yeah, I think I have to be honest, yeah, because I mean. Again, if mine can touch if Mike could touch either of your characters, he's won. But again, the problem is that he's got two opponents to deal with at the same time. And yeah, he can continuously regenerate and even revive himself. If he's completely totaled and destroyed, there is a good point that he might not be able to get back up from a fight like that. Especially because partial abilities and chunks of him being erased, that's not an issue. But having the fact that he can't touch you whilst you're doing it, that's the issue. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting. I think that's actually a very good question to ask, Sam, because I never actually thought of it that way.
Yeah, I think it should be like in whatever the next time we do what we're doing
character
for
ones. We'll do who would win in a fight in the RPG style.
The classic of I think this character would win over that character.
I still think it's a hard. I still think it's a hard yes on Kane's in the terms of it, but I do think all three of them have almost equal opportunity given the right sense of starting points. Again, as Kane said, who goes first? But I'd have to say it's probably in my estimations of it, it's probably, just because I know some of the issues that Catalyst have, I'd say Xenon, then Mary, then Mahito. Because again, if Mahito starts and he uses his domain expansion, he's won. But that's if he starts.
There is also an argument that spatial domination could cancel that out, though.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, there is the argument of like it's telepathic, although then again, quantum space does affect.
It would also affect the range.
Yeah, it affects the range.
So you just be able to generate it around yourself, and that's about it.
Yeah. So again, it just depends on who starts where. Because again, if Xenon does, he's definitely winning. If Mary does, she's definitely winning. Because again, like the two of us can only heal so much, and even your healing is actually a lot more. It's a lot less capable than mine, but even mine has its very obvious limits. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I'd have to say it's either a draw or it's Xenon. I have to say it's too close to tell. Unless if anyone else wants to sort of weigh in on that.
I was just going to answer your previous question that you had, which is what's the lesson we've learned? Ailments are OP.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Insta kill ailments are OP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tune in next time to see what happens next time. The next episode should very well be a general chat podcast, but check back in with us in a couple of episodes' time when we go over another character workshop, and then they'll see exactly what we have then. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, have a wonderful night.
See you in the future.
I don't know, Boogaloo.
As always, ciao ciao for now.